Hello, everyone.
Hello.
This is another edition of Gravity Talk, and today I have a pleasure to host Malajunta crew. Hello, guys.
Hello.
And let's go from left to right. It's JJ, DJ Tool, Naim in the middle, and Jesus here. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yazos, yes.
That's a relief. Anyway, Yazus and Tool will be playing tonight at a party later tonight, and you'll probably spot Naim maybe at the door.
Yeah, I mean, I will be here.
And we'll talk about your duties during Malajunta parties later. For those who don't know, Malajunta for the past few years have been organizing, and I think it's pretty much a consensus, one of the hottest parties in Berlin and around the other cities in Europe, and not only. They mainly oscillate within a techno palette of sounds, but music is important. It what brings us together here, I suppose. But the other really important component are the values that are the core for Malajunta parties, and we'll talk about those. And I think maybe even more prominently than the music. We'll see. And that being said, I think JJ, I'll start with you and ask a kind of chicken or an egg question. But what brought the collective first? Was it the music? Was it the sounds, or the values that you wanted to spread?
I mean, the story is like it is definitely a mix of both from the very beginning. I think like me and Laura like became hyperactivists who we founded the party together with Naim, and like we definitely I moved from Copenhagen to Berlin and definitely brought some music from there and probably some values that were missing in that we saw was missing in Berlin, a mix of that together. But for me personally, it started as coming to Berlin, seeing some really amazing queer underground parties that has really amazing crowds, and it's very at this time was very colorful and full of different people and very inclusive in a way, but still yet in a way very white and very masculine, but yet very much more diverse than the parties we were throwing in Copenhagen in terms of crowd. But in terms of music, it was in a way the opposite, very stuck, very, I would say in a way conservative and very like, stuck around one way was the right way of playing techno in Berlin, like very bleepy, very Berghainy, very like big room stuff. And what we were playing in Copenhagen at this time was much faster, much rawer, a lot of old school 90s techno, 2000s early techno, a lot of trance music and stuff like this. And my first thought when I came to Berlin was that I was overwhelmed about the crowds, but I was underwhelmed about the music actually, like in many ways. Like I was like, okay, like the first time to hear this stuff, it's amazing, but once you've been there for a couple of years, you might be like, okay, I also want to hear something else. So every time I would go back to Copenhagen and to the parties we were throwing there, I would be like, okay, very musically stimulated, but it would still be very straight crowds, like in many sense, and like my first idea was to try to combine these two things and be like, well, these people in Berlin that are amazing should check this out. Like, this is not something that many of them have probably even ever heard. Younger people that came there for other reasons or like and ended in the techno environment for like inclusive reasons of the crowd, but maybe did not pay so much attention to that there might be more to it, to the music side of it than that. And then we brought Anna, hyperactivist, to play with us in Copenhagen. And I showed her a lot of all this music, and I was like, yo, what do you think? And she was like, oh, this is crazy and also really cool. And then we started the talk about how to combine these two things and that we should start a party together. And like, so clearly it came from trying to mix like a music and a crowd that were not combined already. And then I come personally from like a left-wing punk squad background that has a lot of ideals and politics like in it from the very beginning. So for me, these things were just very standard for me. But like clearly, as soon as you start throwing your own event, you will notice that actually, from many people, it's not. And like whenever you start talking about inclusivity, it's like you often feel that you're touching the top of the iceberg. It's like there's much more to it than just talking about an inclusive party and what is like a queer party, what is like an underground party. And when you first perceive Berlin, it might look very underground, but you will maybe dig further into it, and actually it's much more controlled and much more, in a way, has tendencies to be framed in a mainstream way or more like sellable way. So as soon as you start talking about like underground and stuff like this, it's like it has to come from another perspective than established clubs. So therefore we started in a very small spot, and just like there we could control everything that was going on and who's there and what's the music played. But it was definitely started from both sides at once, I would say. It never came, it was never started as a party for politics and then the music came on top, and it was also never started as a party where only about the music and then we were like, okay, like it's we have to make this more inclusive. It kind of came organically from the very beginning, sense of the people that we are, I think.
Uh,
I don't know if that was the answer to the question.
I would like to touch on many topics that you mentioned, but I will stick to the music for now, because you implied that the situation got a bit stale in Berlin when it comes to sounds, and can we imply that that techno in many ways become a commodity, that it's sold like in a buffet for people who are hungry for this experience that was pretty much underground in the past, but right now it became much more, as you put it, sellable.
Indeed, and like talking about how the scene is now, like now we are here throwing the parties for 6 years, and so clearly the climate has changed a lot since then. But nowadays there's definitely many tendencies of booking like events, festivals, parties, like raves, warehouses, etc., that is perceived more as what is selling tickets than what is actually maybe the booker's favorite music. And these things, I think, definitely nowadays, techno was like the same around the 2000s, I would say, as it is around now. After Millennium, it became Ibiza and it became mainstream, it became radio music. In the 90s, it was more like an underground tendency and a nerdy environment, and definitely also a political environment in many ways. But nowadays, you can throw parties for 20,000 people and become millionaire from it, like very quick. As soon as these things becomes possible, the whole thing will be perceived in a different way, and we are definitely trying to do the opposite. We book what we love, and we book what like the people that we believe in, whether or not that's a famous person or a completely unknown person is different. But when we started the party from the beginning, we would never book any known names at all. We would just book people. The party was very like luckily became not as the first party, but like in the beginning got some attention from like we could fill the parties up. It was also like a 100 people party, right? But like it could fill up just from the confidence of people thinking that this party is gonna go off and it's gonna be fun, and then we could get the confidence and the trust from the people to curate a lineup only based on what we think is talented, and then hope for that they will think the same. Usually they did, but like nowadays, people are thinking much more in numbers than they're thinking in talent. I would say.
I think that also connects to the fact that it's obviously much easier to become a DJ right now, given that in the 90s, as you were referring to, you had to have the records to do it physically, and that was a lot of equipment, and you just had to be a little bit privileged to afford all of this, and in a good way. Now pretty much everybody, many people at least, they can get into the scene. On the other hand, it's since the music is so easy to get yeah, it can get easily commodified. And I wanted to ask you about vinyl, as your preferable method of playing. Is it in any way ideological or not?
For me, like it has to be very clear that I'm definitely not kind of a purist in any way, and I don't see any big difference in whether I'm playing on a black plastic or like another type of plastic, like computer. It doesn't really make a good DJ to be spinning records at all. And it also doesn't make a good DJ to be spinning CDJs, but it has to be the actual passion for either digging. Like the way I dig is like I can have a huge collection of records, and I can still dig in my own collection. I still buy a lot of new records, but I can find a B-side that 5 years ago that I was like, okay, this track like I don't have any relation to. I'm gonna play the other side, and 5 years later maybe I like this track. Rather whenever I play CDJs, which I also do, it's like only tracks. It's not defined in EPs and albums in the same way. You would just be like, feels a little bit more like shopping in a shopping mall. You take like one there, one there, one there, one there, but you don't really commit to the whole thing in a way. Plus that for me, I had a huge record collection already before I started to play electronic music and techno at all. Like I was into punk, hardcore, metal, all this stuff, and had a huge collection of that. So I was already in love with the format and the collector's part of it as well, and I'm just tend to be a very nerdy person when it comes to this, to find that epic track, and that little element, and that's my way of doing, but at the same time looking at DJs that gets the full potential out of playing on CDJs is a completely other thing that I would never be able to do. Like when you see like long mixing, layering, of 4 tracks at the same time, that's clearly not going to happen. It's more about the actual. Of course, like vinyl takes a lot of skills to be mixing, especially in nightclubs. A lot of people can do it at home, and probably also on a live stream, they can also be doing it. But in a nightclub, when the whole thing is blasting and the lights are blinking and like the smoke is in your eyes and whatever, it's like completely very delicate. And also that was also one of the things I fell in love with, hearing that coming out in the speakers in Berghain, like something coming from a tiny needle. It's like there's some magic to it somehow, but which is also part of the performance. But I don't see much difference. It's not that I'm more in love with DJs that are vinyl DJs than CDJ DJs. For me, it comes to like, are you actually getting the full potential out of what you have here? People that are taking a shortcut from CDJs, playing in a similar way as how you would play vinyl. I'm not sure I fully get it. But like, if you're actually getting the potential out of CDJs, which can do a million trillion things that vinyls cannot do, then it's both of it should be equally good. And like I personally have like a lot of my favorite DJs are not necessarily playing records. It depends on like the person to the person. There's also plenty of not that good vinyl DJs as well, So I don't think for me it's just a format and a way of communication that fits to me. And like, yeah, that's how I communicate, and this is what touches my heart and my soul are these records. But at the same time, seeing a person flipping CDJs in the best way is like, I love to dance to it as well,
You've shown a lot of passion for this particular format, but I love that you had a little dig at vinyl purists. That what I hoped for actually. Jesus, maybe you would like to add anything on that?
Yeah, clearly as a vinyl expert that I am. I mean, yeah, like I 100% agree. I think it shouldn't be about like the format, like just specifically that, because of course it's all about the music at the end of the day. And like that is like the nice thing about DJs is that everyone has their own like individual take, and everyone has had like a very rich background and different inspirations that would then like lead them to this point of like where they're at. So I think it's, yeah, like regardless of if it's CDJs or vinyl or even CDs back in those days, it's still really cool to like see how people can like curate a journey that's like unique to their own. And like I can definitely relate, like when I moved to Berlin, that was very much my, like I definitely wanted to like disrupt the techno scene, because I was also aware that it was just very, like kind of like, I don't want to say monotonous, but also like I guess I'm saying monotonous. But I mean, I don't know, like I also come from like the world of bass, and like in London it's very common that all of us are like playing multiple genres, and we're going from like insane BPM genres, like we're all playing like maybe even 90 BPM all the way up to 160, 170. So I definitely come from a background where it's like very common to be mixing all types of genres. And I think when I moved to Berlin, I also wanted to do that a little bit. I wanted to like disrupt the scene and, you know, make techno a bit more fun, and also bring techno back to like its black roots and its queer roots of having that soul and having that groove that I think personally was lost due to like the commodification and like, yeah, like just like the business side of things. So yeah, definitely agree.
These are also the topics I would like to touch on, but we'll come back to that because the keyword for this conversation, I think, is inclusivity, and we've already touched on that on some levels, but it's a word, really important one, and I'm happy that it gets more popular as an idea. But how to put it in practice is basically my question, because I can see some improvements in Warsaw, and certain people are doing things to create environments that are inclusive. But what's your view on that? And it's a pretty open question.
I would say that like the key to like having something inclusive is that like if you're talking about having something inclusive for other people than yourself, then you might want to have them included as well in the whole thing, and that means in the organization, in your bookings, in the financial part of your project, and everything. You might need that angle. I might need that angle in my project from other people, like that I want to include in my project. I might want to have them having an equal voice to my voice. Else it becomes very complicated to say that this is inclusive, because there might be angles all the time that you have not seen because it doesn't bother you. You know, like there can be, yeah, there can definitely be other like marginalized people that can come and have a voice and say, actually, we don't feel included in this. And I could be like, oh, but actually, okay, I wanted to have you included in this, and I made my project to have everybody included. But if you don't put all these people in the core of your project, you will never have a fully inclusive project. And that definitely also comes to bookings. Like from the very beginning, you'll have to show a completely diverse like lineup of people, that everybody that are on the dance floor that supposedly should be a diverse crowd can all see themselves in. Like else it just doesn't feel inclusive for everybody, and that is the whole point in a way. So it has to go all the way around in the project to call it an inclusive project, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's very funny because everyone kind of like focuses on the word and like how can it translate, as you say, into like actual practice. And it's because people usually think that just by booking, for example, you know, if you're gonna have to think of, oh, we need to have one female DJ, we need to have one black DJ, now we need to have a trans DJ, we need to have, you know, a queer, all these different things. People really focus on what they need to do, not realizing that if you already make sure that in the inception of the project, of the festival, or anything that you already have a team that reflects the idea that you want to give, it changes completely. So inclusivity is a word that is important, but I think we should all try to kind of like work into removing the idea of inclusivity, in the sense that normalizing the fact that we're all part of a whole, and that is not just kind of like certain people that have the power to include certain people. Because when you remain in this dynamic, you still have this kind of like power dynamics that we're trying to break. And when we started Mala, and it's obviously something that we've been, you know, labeled or kind of like celebrated for a lot, which is our inclusivity. And it's not something that ever came as like a reflection, that came like, oh guys, we need to have X, Y, and Z on the lineup. It's just because naturally we're trying to have in the dance floor or in the party the same world that feels like, you know, our world. So if you're gonna have a lineup and you're still thinking, we're missing a woman, we're missing a queer person, maybe it's because you're missing the person that can give you that impulse already in your team. So if you can make sure that everyone is an equal level, give the same opportunity, break. And if you're gonna be that person, you know, if you're gonna be that first person that is in a pivotal position, then try to be the one that brings other people there, so it becomes more and more normalized. It's like, if you're gonna be the one that steps the first foot in the room, break the door and bring more people to join you there.
And you'll also have to, like, in a way, often you'll have to have the feeling that you'll also have to give away power, like that you have to all the time reflect on, like, are we sitting, as names say, with the power to include other people? You might have to give away power and include more people in the core, even though it makes the whole project much more complicated. The more people you are in the organization, the more complicated it becomes, because people have more opinions, but that's probably also because that there's more different opinions from different backgrounds and whoever people that you are. From our project, there was never a decision to be an inclusive party, because who we are that started the party was already 3 very different people. So already there was like a frame of that everybody needed to be equally heard from the very beginning, and therefore probably it felt very inclusive from the beginning for the people that came to the event, since that the people that started the event was 3 different people, or 3 very, very different people representing different marginalized minorities in a way. And like from there, then it's been like, okay, like who do you want to give the jobs and the shifts, and like who do you want to give them to in your club? Might also be that already the first person you see when you arrive to the party is important to see, and there's people that feel, okay, here's a home for me, because the last party I went to was a white straight man that was the first person I saw, and that was not who I am. Like, in a way, it's important who you're seeing working in the party, who's organizing the party, because those people represent a minority each that should be included. But definitely the daring to give the power away, it can suck at times for sure, but that is what it costs in the end. Like if you want to do something very inclusive and sustain it for a long while, often people are talking about inclusivity, and a few years later it all breaks down because someone finds out that actually in the end of the day it was more or less a word, instead of that actually these people wanted to share with everybody. You need to have the urge to want to share equally much that you're having yourself.
And not having also be a trend. I think that's like, especially with the world kind of at one point, like some years ago, the world kind of like woke up and realized that the diversity exists. They're like, oh my God, there's not a norm. And unfortunately, like a lot of things, it's almost a trend. It's like there's a focus on it for a couple of years, and then little by little it goes back to like a norm of the same kind of lineups, the same kind of majority of like.
It almost sells,
Yeah.
It becomes like, it becomes a buzzword that sells to say queer or to say inclusivity, and in the end of the day, if it sells tickets, then at the end of the day you're doing exactly the opposite. You're exploiting the people instead of including the people.
So you were talking about the negative byproduct, awesome reverse reaction that is that can be called tokenism, I think, which is it's for the bookers and club owners and festival heads in Poland. Like, we should make a clip from that. Because I think it's really valuable to understand that it's not a trend. And of course, the makeup of Polish society and Warsaw is changing pretty much when it comes to that. But yeah, we're still learning that there are people that are different from the norm. But I won't be going deeper into that. I think we were inside the club at the party. Let's go outside and let's stop at the door. Because Naim, from what I understand, you do selection at the door, and someone that sticks to the words can say that, selection at the door, it's pretty much exclusive. I mean, there can be a different understanding of both exclusive and inclusive, but probably you have to not let someone in to let different people in. So if you could expand on that role, because it seems really, really vital.
I mean, definitely. And I think it's funny because it's not like I often joke with like either with other friends that do the door in Berlin and other places that like you kind of like it's not a job that you apply for, but you're chosen. One of my favorite is going to be a little moment about myself, but one of my favorite TV show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer starts with every generation there's a Slayer chosen to fight evil. And I think in the idea that you're chosen, it's not something that you kind of like go for, it's organic. So for me, when I started doing that, I'd never done the door before. It's also not something that I had thought of doing. So when we started the project and Anna and Jojo wanted me to do the selection because they trusted me, it took me first a moment of being like, whoa, but they trust me to judge people and to decide who is going to be let in. And as you said, there's kind of a oxymoron idea of like wanting to make an inclusive space and then being exclusive because certain people are not allowed. But the starting point of that is that we have to create, first of all, a space that is a protected space. So the exclusivity here is not an exclusivity in terms of rejection. And I never say that I reject people. I hate the word rejecting people. I curate a crowd and I curate a space that I know I will myself as a Black queer person feel safe. And I will hope, and I hope that the people that are maybe not like me, but like-minded would feel safe as well. So it's this idea that we want to create a space that if the outside is dangerous and rejecting and judging, at least here for 10, 12, 20 hours, you can have the idea that it's safe. And the safety comes, as we were saying before, also from arriving at a club and seeing someone that, I am French, and for a very long time, you could not enter a club if you're a Black man because people would just not think that you're a worthy client, even though we invented most of the music that people are dancing to inside. Or you could not go in because you're not wearing the right shoes or the right shirt or all these kind of different things, which is very stupid. So it's very funny that nowadays, of course, it's very important to try to select the right crowd because people have come to realize that if you actually allow people to be in a space where they can feel protected and they can feel safe, it's the most beautiful moment. So for me, I never think of I'm here to exclude people. I'm here to nurture people that are coming. And when we started touring around and throwing Mala Junta in other places, there's never really been a party that kind of like travels around the world and has their door person coming from another city, from another country that doesn't really know the crowd, that comes and decides who goes in. And I then judge fully based on my gut and based on what is the space that I want to have inside. So I've done it in like Kiev, Copenhagen, Stockholm, New York, all different kind of places. And it's really because it's important for us to make sure that the ideas and the values that we have in Mala Junta are not just a show. It's something that we want to present and offer to people, and the energy I want to give it to people everywhere we go and make sure that it's being like nurtured and that we can have this exchange. So I feel that it's a selection that is based on creating a special space.
And we don't have like we have a specific crowd, but our crowd is like hopefully a good mix of everybody. It's not like a very specific party that's only for one minority. So it's like usually like done, like hopefully there is like a majority of minorities in the party, but that doesn't mean that you cannot get into the party if you're straight, for example. This is like, these myths are like, something that is like definitely not existing in our party at all. Like the whole thing is to create a society where the norms might be flipped from the society that is outside. And a lot of the people that gets in and gets very happy for getting in has just been rejected to 10 other clubs for being a minority. It's good that there's a space here for these people where they get in first, That I think is a pretty clear point from the very beginning of why when we started the party was that this space should definitely be a space for the people that cannot get in everywhere else, and that is a fair point. And I am not a minority, and I don't have a problem with getting rejected to a party like this, because like once in a while you would also get in, but it might not be every time that the space is your space, it will, all the other spaces are my spaces, And that is like a clear point, I think, from the very beginning with why selection in these types of parties are important, because someone has to take care of that it doesn't become the people who feels the most, who takes the most space, and that will have to be sorted like that, I would say.
Because it's very much like, you know, I remember once, for example, in Kiev, in Ukraine, and some people were not understanding being rejected. And I told them, you know, it's very simple. You got told no. And I know that sometimes it's hard to be told no. There's certain people that, unfortunately, life has never told them no. And there's other people who, just by being who they are, it's automatically, you know, it's a no because you cannot fully be who you want to be for, you know, dangerous reasons. But if I tell you no tonight, you can go to probably any other club and you will still have a good time. There's many people who, if you don't allow them to come first, to come safely, to be themselves, then they might not have another option. And that's exactly that I kind of have as a drive, is that we have to prioritize the ones that for a very long time were beyond being marginalized, were just forgotten, or that were just kind of like left. And the whole idea of exclusivity is because for a very long time we had to create our own spaces just to exist, because the most important spaces were not giving us the space to exist. And now that we are, as you know, as a whole, the cool thing, and everyone wants to go to queer clubs like to have fun, then people don't understand why we had to protect our space.
I think you could turn it a bit on its head, like the concept, and say that someone who never had the experience of not being let in some space should get that experience at least once.
At least once. It's like, it's humbling. I think it's very humbling. But at the same time, it's also important, like Jojo was saying, I think it's, for example, the idea of queerness, and that's my own personal idea, but that's also our, as Mala Junta, the idea is that queerness is a spectrum, and that to be able to actually make sure that it preserves its essence and its nature, you have to have a space that puts everyone on the same level, but also flips the norms that you were saying before. So we need to be able to have certain people that be humbled a little bit, so then when you walk in, you don't take as much space because you already are used to that.
And if we don't do a selection, it will very simply, very quickly be the same society happening inside the club as outside the club. It will be the same power structure of the same people that will take more space than other people, because the people that did not have a lot of space from the very beginning might not take that much space on the dance floor, in the bar, whatever it is, and the people that used to have a lot of space on the outside are very used to like having a lot of space in the room. And if you want to flip those two things and give those people the space that they deserve, that everyone deserves, you have to have more of them than the other ones. Automatically, we will have the same situation if we don't reject a ton of people that are not minorities, you know, or rather they are minorities. Some of them are also minorities in some ways, but maybe like there is enough, like the party is supposed to reflect enough of everybody. And like that will also be that like when people can get rejected, like, you know, because that like tonight we have a lot of them, of this type of person or whatever, the like inside, and we don't want to have a room that has too many of one, because it means that less space for the other ones. And that is, in the end of the day, the core of the thing, that if we will end with the same society inside the dance floor that we will have on the outside of the streets, and we don't want that.
All right. So it's a time for a 5-minute break. We'll continue the conversation in a moment. Break. Okay. Let's go back. I think to the topic of our conversation, and I still have a lot to ask. Let's see what happens. Jesus, I would like to ask you, I think, a couple of questions, especially if you could share with us some aspects of your story, being a DJ, being part of the scene, because yeah, you represent a couple, at least, of minorities that are oppressed around the world. Either because of gender or ethnicity, and it's painful for me to say that, but that's how it is, pretty much. So, did you have any struggles because of that during your musical career?
Yeah, so like this question is funny because I totally understand like the importance of like why it gets asked, but I like of course like I've experienced like the odd like sexist comment or people sort of being like, oh, she's only there because being black and being a woman is like in right now. Like I've definitely experienced these comments, but I will say I think like London, it's a completely different ball game. Like I said before, like I come from a different world completely. I think in techno for sure, there's still, like it is still definitely like male dominated, and like especially all like the kind of pre-existing techno labels and techno parties, it is all run by like cis straight white dudes and bros. So like for sure, I think if I was more kind of like growing up in that scene, I would have experienced it. But because London, so that like I started 10 years ago. And like, I guess like my friends and like the communities that I was part of was like super diverse. And it's also to do with the music. It's like when people are playing everything from reggaeton, footwork, like deconstructed club, you're also bringing a lot of people from different backgrounds. So I was like actually very fortunate to kind of be part of these industries. Like I remember in East London mainly, there was like a lot of really cool like hubs and radio stations that we would all just sort of like hang out and yeah, just like share music. And also like this radio station, like it was called Radar Radio. It's shut down now. It's actually got cancelled, but that's like another story. But yeah, like for that station, it was actually like majority like the female DJs. Like they had like the best shows, and everyone was actually talking about the female artists. And it was also interesting because grime and hip hop was also included in this. And like, that was a very big conversation. Like, how can we include more women in the grime scene? Because that was very toxic and that was very male dominated. But to see DJs like doing like breakfast shows and they're like, they're also like kind of showing their like dominance in that scene. And I think that really inspired me. And that's why I feel I don't really get like I don't really get like stressed out if I hear like, oh no, someone made like a sexist comment about me. It's like I read, like it doesn't faze me at all because I understand that I'm also very much part of a collective and I'm part of so many different like micro scenes that are like also women, and we're all like pushing our own thing. Like before Malahunta, I was part of a DJ collective called Six Figure Gang, and it was like 6 DJs. Again, we all had like our own careers and it was like all from different backgrounds. We all like played completely different music, but like our thing was like we would all go back to back to back to back to back to back like 6 times. And like it was just really cool to like we had like a rinse show, and then like Boiler Room like took us on tour. And like yes, I feel really like fortunate to actually be part of like a lot of really cool things happening. But I have realized that it is very much like you have to be part of and also create and like be part of these groups and communities. And I think like Malahun says the exact same thing. It's like when you actually have people joining together, you can really like A, disrupt the scene, and B, also like be an inspiration and be like a real forward thinking movement and like really like propel the scene. So I think for sure, like if anyone is ever sort of like concerned about, oh, like, I want to get into this, but it's very male dominated or it's very X, Y, and Z, it's like just start things with your friends and find like-minded people to like that are doing the same things that you want to do. Like, which is for sure like change the scene and like, fuck up the scene. I think there's definitely more power in numbers, and like when you join together, it's like it's actually crazy how much you can do when you're like in a group. And also it's just more fun to like not be so individualistic. Like that's one thing that I hated about London. Like on the flip side, it's like if you weren't in a collective or if you weren't like doing something like community based, it's like so business and like it's very like like you only think about yourself and like how can I push this other person to like make it to the top. And like London as a city is very that, like it's very corporate and it's very like tunnel vision. And I definitely had that a little bit. Like there was even times when I would see my friends killing it and I'm just sort of like, oh, like why am I not doing it? Like, oh, I need to work on this, instead of just like continuing to be part of the collective and like not really think about my progress but think about the collective progress. And of course that's going to impact me anyway. So I think for sure like I think I'm just lucky enough to like always be in a group of some sort, and that definitely helps me like kind of get rid of any like of these voices and negativity that people would want to like comment on. So
That's really interesting because I wanted to ask you about the need of being in the group pretty much. But when it comes to let's stick to women representation. Remember, all women are women, and do you think that right now the things will get better organically? Are we on the right track, or do we still need to be much more active in that department?
Um, I think it is like I think like it is getting better constantly. Like I will say, for example, 10 years ago there wasn't as many like bigger like female artists. I will say there's still room for like producers. I think in the production side of things, and especially like the technical side of things, like engineering, I think that still for sure can like have more like a non-male presence. And I think there is still this sort of like I used to teach production and DJing, and that was always like the kind of feedback that I would get from like my female students. Like they'd always be like, DJing is a little bit easier to get into because it's not obviously it's still technical, but it's not as technical as like opening up Ableton or even like looking at mastering, for example. So I think in that realm, I think if there's like more sort of like workshops or seminars, that's a bit more sort of like the technical, and get like the kind of nerdy women, like they also would like a space where they feel that they can also make mistakes. So I think that side of the industry is still very much like male dominated, and like there's only a certain like handful of clubs where it's like the sound techs are women. Like it is still very much like it's like that nerdy guy. It's still very much that role. So I think in terms of DJing, I think I'm definitely seeing like that. Yeah, there's like a ton of talent, also like trans non-binary talent, like that's been like kind of fostering out from all these different genre of music, everything. But yeah, I think the technical jobs, I think for sure that can have like more women.
That's funny. I would liken it to film industry, because when you look at the Oscars each year by year, you have like this sound engineering categories, and the winner is always like a movie with a lot of cars, or a war movie with a lot of a whole action movie with a lot of explosions. Why? Because the guys are choosing it, because they are the ones that are in the academy actually. And in music world, there I could name like probably two sound engineers working in the industry. Great that you've said it. A few years back here in Poland, and it concerned techno scene. There was like, I think, a quite big debate when it come to representation and women on stage. I think we're much better right now. It's still not perfect, but the main argument was, there were a couple. Of course, the main one was, if they were talented, they would be already on the scene, or something like that. But and of course I'm mocking these comments, but on the other hand, there was this line that, oh, it's politics, basically, like gender, sexuality. Yeah, like this is political stuff. We don't need that in the club. That was prevailing argument, and I think it's time to talk about mixing these worlds a bit, music and politics. We could interpret the words that I've just said in many different ways, either being like a bigotry, or I don't know, a need of escapism from the world, there's only you, music, other people. That was a really long introduction to a simple question about mixing. Uh, Sorry, guys. Yeah. If we could talk about these two worlds, how they can collide.
I mean, it's very funny that it's not that it's a question coming from you. I mean, it's funny that it's a question or that objection for certain people. It's kind of like first music. How could music not be political? Because music is a form of language, is an organic, emotional, spiritual, transcending form of language that has unified and has kind of has so many different meanings. So of course it's going to be political because it's a way of like communicating and unifying people and transcending a lot of different things that maybe we're not able to do normally. And then when it comes to club culture, especially when it comes to like raves, is that like electronic music started as a counterculture. It started as a counter movement, and all the different genres were like, for the most of them, created by minorities or by, as counter movements to something, people that needed to find their own identity, recognize, and then they managed to create, this genre of music. So it has to be political because it is what it is. It's inherently political. And I find it a bit of an excuse for people who don't want to look at basically the mirror. If you want to refuse to look at the mirror, you're going to try to point at it and say, this is a joke. We should not have these discussions on the dance floor. And right now, of course, our planet is going through a lot in many different places. And so a lot of people think that, music or, raves or nightlife should just be as an escape. But how can you just escape it? How can you just forget what is happening? Because no matter what, your life is going to be impacted by what's going on. So the idea that, discussing if we need to have more women on the dance floor is just like identity politics. Of course, identity politics are a little bit commodified right now. Everyone is using them a bit as a scapegoat and trying to not really solve the problem. But it's often to look at what's wrong. And sometimes people also think that when something is being called out, they take it personally. They don't realize that it is an entire institution. It's like a system that has been going on for years and years and years. And certain people benefit from it, so they don't need to actually challenge it. And so that's why they refuse to have the collide of politics and music or at large nightlife.
And definitely, I would bet that the majority of the people that don't want politics and the dance floor will already be privileged people. At least the majority of it will be people who it doesn't concern, or the people that it actually concerns. To call it politics is also a very big word. It's not like what's going on in the government. It's like, we have some norms and some like ideals here that we try to preserve, that everybody is free here together, and to preserve that we have to have some rules. Again, talking about, for example, selection, as we talked about before, we also have a set of rules that we like to imply here. You can call it politics, but you can also say that it's just to be decent human beings to each other. And when our society outside, again, is not a fair society where everybody is living equally, we have racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, you name it, a million different things there. If we are trying to make a fair place here for everybody to be free together and to whatever escape that society together, we have to have a better answer to that inside, and that only comes through politics. So or through like ideals, and to uphold those ideals, I bet that the people which shoe it's pushing, like, who's hurting too, is the people who have to give some power away, not the people who's gaining some power. It would be very rarely non-privileged people saying that why should we have these things here, because it's for their concern in the end of the day. And I think in all art there is to a certain place you can like separate the art and the artist. Whatever you are listening to at home in your bedroom, I don't think many people is gonna give a fuck about. Whatever you wear on your t-shirt is a statement, and we're trying to make some statements inside our safe spaces to make them safe. That is public politics in a way. This cannot exist without it, and I don't get it. Whatever, like, if you're going to a huge concert of 100,000 people, it will be very hard to imply politics there. But to say that the dance floor should be free of politics will only be for people who already have everything outside of the dance floor, in my opinion.
It's really interesting what you said. like of course, for me and I think for the people gathered here, it's obvious that there's music and there's a message and there are people behind the music who made it. And I personally adhere to the notion that the greatest art comes from the struggle. You have to have some kind of struggle in your life to oppose to something and get your creative voice to name it. But interesting thing with electronic music in particular is that since it's mainly instrumental, uh, it can be uprooted. Like you can easily remove the context, which you most probably you will get some message from the vocals, from the lyrics, but electronic music lacks that. Maybe you could have some message on the record sleeve, but of course not everyone own it physically. And this is how it became really easy to just grab the sounds and not acknowledge who actually made it. Of course, it's not like there's a group of people who did that really cynically, or maybe they did. Who knows? But it's a bit like with rock and roll, like and with Elvis, actually. Like it's I'm not discovering America or anything, but this is exactly what happens really fast, and with the use of internet and so on.
I mean, it's the whole idea of like generalization. Maybe it's not the right word, but it's just the whole idea of, you know, something happens and very quickly when it gets spread very fast into a wide number, you lose basically its essence and what it meant. So whether there's rock and roll or house music or techno or so many different subgenres that like very easily when they get spread, it's almost, you know, this idea that if you say something to someone and the more this thing's going to be repeated, you're going to get further and further and further from actually the truth because you lose the essence of the original statement. And I feel with music, and especially like you said with like electronic music, because it's much more easy to kind of like spread it and like people are not always kind of like connected to what maybe it might be originally, then you might lose what it meant or what it meant for the people who created it. And it can be a struggle, it can be a resistance, but it can also be celebration. You know, there's a lot of celebration. House music is also it's about celebration basically, and the message of celebration is still translated when maybe it's not, let's say, a black or BIPOC queer person playing it, but at the same time, the origin of the celebration is forgotten. And that's where we have to try to kind of like remember, because this, it's try to like share the idea, but also remember the message of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like 100% techno, and like that's what a lot of artists are doing now. It's like we have to kind of like do the work, which was sort of, yeah, it's like definitely like lost in translation over time. Like, you know, techno kind of got discovered in the 90s, or like brought over to Europe, and then now, even now, UNESCO are, you know, looking at, they're calling Berlin techno. And it's crazy because, yeah, me and Jojo had a look at the website and there is zero mention of Detroit and Chicago.
Not one word,
Not even
you
just
know,
one
like where it
sentence.
actually came from. It sounds
Yeah.
like it came from Berlin. Like, you know, I'm
Yeah,
not so
really,
sure.
yeah.
Just happened, techno, and like happened in the 90s.
Yeah,
Nothing
you know,
happened before.
Berlin perfected it.
But I think also like there's also an importance of that stuff also is allowed to grow and can also grow mainstream in a way. It's more rather we should mix these two things together, you know. Like I don't have any problem with like techno and EDM, like that EDM is becoming huge and like there's types of techno that is touching this, but whether or not it should be so closely mixed together is when it becomes more dangerous, that we cannot really see what's actually coming from the right purpose or what is just selling tickets, you know. And like it is, we can never in a capitalistic society keep capitalism away. It will be swallowed. It will be money in the end of the day, but whatever we are trying to do, we just need to do for the right reason and make sure that like, and that doesn't come for free. We will not earn the same amount of money and have the same amount of followers on Instagram and whatever. And that is the costs of actually doing it for the purpose that it was made for in the very beginning. You know, like whether or not you are doing it for another purpose now is up to the individual themselves. But then maybe don't come and say that you're doing it for those right reasons that it was made for. You know, that's what can make me pissed.
Yeah, I started to wonder because for many years I've been writing about music, and of course sounds, emotions are important. But yeah, the context, the stories of the people are the most important things for me right now. But I'm really frustrated that people they just don't care about this, and I wonder how can we tell these stories actually, or should I just accept it that people don't care about the context, and this is how it's going to be like. But anyway, I have time for maybe 2 more questions. We'll see. Because I have one more thing about the club experience, and it's a touchy subject, I think. But since you are mainly at the door, at every club there are security staff, there are bouncers, and I say it's a touchy subject because these people should be there to protect the party goers. Maybe sometimes they forget that they are there for this purpose, and sometimes they resort to violence. That's the experience. I think everyone here at least seen that at least once during when being at the club, and I wonder if how does it look in Berlin basically when it comes to security staff and yeah, the bouncers, as I put it.
Well, I've had my fair share of arguments with security staff. Luckily, I love to argue, so it's actually usually quite fun. But more seriously, it's definitely this. The idea that you have people who are there to protect. They're not these terrible people who are called the police, who are also supposedly to protect, but they're not. They're just kind of, so to be somewhere and to have to work with people, sometimes you have to know, okay, for sure maybe that person doesn't fully understand me or respect me, but we're here today to make sure that the people that we welcome in our space are taken care of. And for a very long time in Berlin, the trend when it comes to security or selection was to be very aggressive and demeaning and disrespectful, and it was almost cool to be kind of like cold and aggressive from the bouncers. That also then trickled down to the people doing the security. And it is changing on one side. I think when it comes to the selection, the people doing the selection are kind of like not going for this act of, oh, I'm a door bitch and I'm going to be really rude. Even though it can be cool, but it's not the 80s anymore. You don't need to do that. But when it comes to the security, they still go with this kind of like aggressivity. And they kind of tend to forget that people are coming here to have fun. They're coming here to escape their week, their world. They're coming here to enjoy, and it changes everything if the contact that you have at the entrance is actually caring. And of course, you don't have to just make buddy-buddy with them, but just to not be aggressive. And being around the world and seeing how other securities do it, it's quite sometimes sad to come back to Berlin and to see that they're still so stuck in this idea, especially in clubs or spaces that are so respected and so influential in our industry or in our scene, where they still act the same, so cold and so tough and so disrespectful and aggressive, not just physically but also with their words. And there's no need for this. Of course, when there's something happening, you should be able to do that, but there's absolutely no need to traumatize someone that is wanting to go in a club.
That's been a problem.
Absolutely.
But also, that's also one of the main also a very important reason of why to try to separate the selection and the security in many, like in, for example, in our place, it's like there's a lot of clubs also where it's the same people that is acting as the actual security that needs to be also acting like the bulldogs whenever something is happening, which can be important at times. Often, many times it's not, but it's the same people that are also deciding who is getting in or not, or how they are welcomed to the club. And those two things could very easily be separated. And like actually maybe it should be some person that can, like name, can work together with these people with the security, but other people talking to the people coming to the club. It doesn't have to be the same person. And often it's better to have someone that knows the people that goes out, that like knows who is who, and like are not just acting like the bulldog, in a way. It for us was very important from the beginning that it would never be the security ever deciding who's coming in and who's not. Whenever the person doesn't want to respect the decision, then they can talk to the other part of the security, And that thing, I think, fundamentally changes everything. Like, who's welcoming you to the club is someone that goes to the club themselves, Like, it's not someone that are only working in the security.
Just to remove the barriers, I think. The idea that, as much as I start and do most of the party at the door, I end the party on the dance floor with everyone else. And, yeah. And like there's, because for example, when it comes to DJs, there's a booth. So there's a respect and there's a separation between the crowd and the DJs because there's this booth and people really respect the booth. The door person or any other staff member for that matter that works at a club, you don't really have this separation. It's very easy to access them. And it can be a lot sometimes, but it also is the beauty of it because you have a direct contact to the people that come and you can do so much with that contact. You can nurture people, you can help people, you can also just kind of inspire them, not in a pretentious way, but just to be like, I can feel myself and I can be great here. And when you go to a club or a festival or whatever, and you just see a very big, let's say, male presenting person that is very intimidating and scary, do you really want to go there and actually be yourself and feel and liberate yourself? Not sure, because then you go inside with this fear that you maybe have in your daily life all the time, which is this like, I'm being, policed and kind of like, surveilled a little bit.
Reflecting on Malajunta's journey through like past, you said 6 years, I think. Did you hit the ground running and everything was sunshine and roses, or yeah? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been
okay,
sunshine,
so,
roses, and like sunsets. The craziest part is that there was a whole pandemic that happened, and for us the pandemic happened just at a moment where we felt like we're just starting to get a little bit comfortable. We got into that and we really started organizing parties for our friends and the friends of our friends.
The first US tour, like that took us like 7 months to organize 7 shows, and then we fly into to Seattle, and when we land there, Corona happened and all the flights were canceled and the whole tour disappears.
Then it's obviously the whole world changed, and we were still a baby party. We were still kind of like starting, so we had to think, well, what was gonna happen? And not only coming back after Corona and trying to kind of like create things in a completely different world, but also just like the entire industry is changing. We're changing also as well as people. We're friends, but we're all also people. So the evolution of it is also impacted by our own evolution as people. So it's never going to be an easy route because nothing is easy in life. I'm sorry. And if something is too easy, maybe there's something wrong. If something is too comfortable, when you look at a monitor, if something is like this, that means you're dead. It has to be like up and down.
Pretty much. Yes,
you have to have these struggles. Yeah, you have to have these struggles and this kind of like doubt, this moment of doubt, because these moment of doubts also creatively, also for the music, also for us, we started with one genre. We were kind of like put in a box, people thinking they're just the trans party. And then at one point we were just like, we want to go further. We want to go to places that maybe we're not comfortable with. We want to have new residents that bring completely different like influences.
I think we always said already in one of the first interviews we did that the most important part of what we are doing is that it's always in motion. It's always moving. It will never get stuck. Whenever it gets too popular for one thing, we're going to flip it to something else because that's when the magic happens, And like for me personally has been the same as a DJ, that like whenever you hit the golden spot of some genre and people really likes it, I cannot even have it. I'm like, okay, I want to do something else, you know, like, and that's on good and bad, you know, like it might take a lot longer time, but it also lasts longer. Like it will be good at many things, and that's definitely a part of the whole Malahunta thing from the beginning, is to not stand still and to not like rely on that we have it. You know, I don't think we ever feel that we have it. You know, that now we have sorted the formula, and from here we can just like lean back and then like that's gonna roll. You know, like every party we are like shaking about, like let's see how this one goes. You know, like, and put the biggest effort into the details of the whole thing, curating the night from the beginning to the end, and like actually paying attention to the actual details. And it's much more work than just finding the formula and repeating it, but it's also much more fun. Like it is.
And in that way, that's how we also kind of like manage to maintain our integrity, which is not like a word that we constantly tell each other, but it's definitely a word that is very important for us, is to make sure that whatever happens, we can look back at a party, or we can look back at the lineup, we can look back at a project that we do and be sure that this is a project that we feel is us, and that we don't feel that we did something because we had to do it. And even if it doesn't work, at least we can feel that.
Exactly, and it's already been 6 years, and it's a lot of ups and downs, and some things are great success, some things is a bit of a flop, but you don't stop there. Whenever you have a flop, you're not going to stop there. You're just going to be, okay, like what do we need to pay attention to make this better, or to make the people understand, or make the idea behind it, or what did we do wrong. But like it is a constant moving process, and there is no real goal in the end besides just to keep on like inspiring people and inspiring ourselves, and like, you know, taking the stuff forward, you know, like, and yeah, moving the whole thing forward.
Sadly, we'll have to wrap this up in a moment. But just a reminder that Yazus and DJ Tool are going to play tonight at Move Musk Party with Cyril, my namesake, in a way, and all attacks. This will be the main stage, and Peter Ferkal, Matrix 3K, and Onkalo are going to perform at the bar stage, and the Gravity series actually continues tomorrow night with John Talabot and the regulars such as Fatrax and Kowalski, and also Ophaly at the bar stage. And thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Perfect. Oh wait, come, wait. Come on, Matri.
Okay, so that's not the one. Just to catch the light, because you're already in the dark.
It will be easy with 1x1 fire, sure.